Today on the Expect Miracles podcast, we have a recurring guest, Dr. Ben Benulis, who is a chiropractor and a healthcare advocate for the truth. He has a great Instagram page at dr.benjaminbenulis. He has a great book on how to heal naturally from autoimmune disease called The Autoimmune Recovery Blueprint. He is also a recurring guest on the podcast. His previous episode is titled The Digestive Rescue Blueprint. If you want to check that out after this episode, he has an amazing life story on how he was able to heal himself naturally from autoimmune disease. But today, we are not talking about that. Today, we are talking about the damage and dangers 5G is doing on our body and our planet. And I just wanted to just shed some light on what 5G is and what it's doing. So 5G technology can cause cancer, DNA damage, breakage of the blood-brain barrier, impaired blood flow to the brain, reproductive system injuries, damage to the prenatal brain, reduced melatonin and mitochondria damage, sperm and testicular injuries, cognitive and memory problems, neurological disorders, endocrine changes, Alzheimer's, heart palpitations, EEG changes, auditory effects, immune system dysfunction, oxidative stress, calcium overload, and this is all cited from an environmental research journal in 2018. So I'm very excited to learn more about what 5G is doing. It's a hot topic right now, and it really needs to be talked about because it is doing a lot of damage on everyone's health, and a lot of people don't know it's happening. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ben Benulis. Dr. Ben, how are you today?
I'm having a good day. Thanks for having me on, Dr. Pecca. It's been a while since I think we did an Instagram together a while back. I don't think that made it onto your podcast, but we haven't checked in since maybe the beginning of COVID.
So. Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a couple years since you've been on the podcast, and we did that one Instagram live, which was great. And you're doing some great work, Ben, and you're really you got a big voice of just sharing the truth about what's really going on in the healthcare industry. And I applaud your bravery for speaking out, because a lot of people don't want to do it because they're, afraid of what might happen. But it's so great to hear people speaking the truth and shed some light on what's really going on in the world today.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a duty and obligation. We both took an oath to, first do no harm and take care of people. And if that means being disliked, if that means being hated, ridiculed, being called a quack, I'll take the punches. It's no big deal to me.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of research going on behind this that's showing that 5G, which causes radiation, the EMF, electrical magnetic field, which we'll jump into. But Dr. Ben, you actually reached out to me and you said you wanted to do a 5G podcast, and I've actually been looking for someone to do this podcast. So I'm glad you reached out. And so Dr. Ben, why is this a passion of yours right now?
Sure. So number one, I live in Arizona, which is kind of like the pilot state for us for 5G. It's getting rolled out the most here.
Is it really?
Yeah. So it's really, they're really pushing it here. The laws have made it so that it's very hard to resist it here. And then, so that's an issue. And then also, Kevin, I worked in the electronics industry, the microchip industry, telecom, that kind of stuff before I became a chiropractor. So wow. I was involved with this. I mean, I didn't develop any of it, but I was involved working for companies that were inventing this type of technology back in like 2011, 2012. It was still very nascent. So I'm familiar with it, and it just became something that got on my radar, and pardon the pun, and I just had to learn more about it. And I have this unique background where I'm an engineer and I'm also a chiropractor, and so I understand the nervous system, and I also understand EMFs and things like that. And so it became very apparent that this was a real danger and something that people needed to be educated about, and we needed to try to stop.
Now, was there any warning signs or something that you felt wasn't right when you were working with like the 5G technology when it came out back in, what was it, 2011, 2012?
Had no idea. We thought we were doing a good thing. Back then, it was smart meters. It was basically, okay, we're going to improve connectivity. I mean, there's advantages to the technology. It does things. It improves internet connectivity. You can send messages wirelessly. Someone doesn't need, for example, a smart meter doesn't need to come by your home to check your meter reading. They can just zap it with a gun from across the street and get a reading. But the only problem is that meter's shooting out in every direction and it's hitting you as well. So back then, no, there wasn't, like, I was familiar with technology, and we didn't safety test things like, test it on humans. Like, we didn't do that.
Right.
It was not like we worked for a drug company.
Right.
We tested it to make sure that it worked and it did what it was supposed to do, but we were never like, oh, is this going to hurt people when it gets out there? That was not even like,
yeah.
We just assumed that it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that anybody was a bad person or there's any evil plans or anything. It's just never thought to do it. Didn't think it was a problem.
Now, when did people start finding out 5G it was having an effect on the lives of many people?
So
on their health.
Okay, sure. And so Kevin, this goes beyond health. There are implications to the environment as well as security, which we'll get into, and all are kind of equally bad.
Yes, let's touch on it all, definitely.
Sure. So the way that people got really alerted to it was because of the frequency band that 5G uses. So just real quick for people, there's something called an electromagnetic spectrum. And so on that spectrum, there's radio waves, there's microwaves, there's shortwave, there's infrared, ultraviolet, visible light, sound, ultrasound, subsonic, all that. It's a spectrum, okay? And so the specific frequency band that 5G uses is microwave radiation, okay? And so what we do have is, and so people who are familiar with electromagnetic fields and radiation and study radiology, they know that microwaves and microwave radiation is actually extremely toxic and extremely harmful to humans. And it's actually one of the most studied technologies as far as how it affects human health. And the reason for that being is that the US military, the Russian military, the Chinese military, the NSA, CIA, have all been studying it on how to use it as a weapon. Okay. And this has been going on since before World War II. Okay. They said, okay, can we beam the microwaves directly at people and fry them or kill them somehow? Okay. And as luck would have it, it just so happens the technology is also good at sending data. Okay. But we know microwave radiation, the technology that 5G uses, the frequency band that it uses, is harmful because we have 100+ years of studies showing harm. So that was kind of, people started sounding the alarm and they said, oh, you're going to be beaming microwaves at everybody and these towers are going to be close together and they're going to be right against people's houses and they're going to be lowered to the ground. Like this sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how the alarm first got sounded on 5G.
Really? Okay. And so how has it evolved? And it's especially during Corona, it sounds like they've had a lot of plans to just, everybody's kind of in lockdown. They want to just roll these towers out and really put it out there. As you said, Arizona is kind of like a pilot state for it. They're really cranking them out now. And with this data now showing up, it doesn't like looking like they're stopping anytime soon. It just keeps like it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this technology has been in development for a long time. It is coincidentally rolling out with the coronavirus lockdowns. Whether there's a causative relationship or this was planned in advance or there's some sort of quote unquote conspiracy, I really don't know. I really can't say, but it is awfully strange that it's happening at the same time. But this technology has been under development for a long time. Like I said, I worked for a company that was developing some technologies that are a part of it now. It is rolling out, and the laws that protect the telecom industry were put on the books ages ago. Yeah. Sometimes as far back as 1996.
Wow.
And so, like most recently in Arizona, we have something called HB 2365, which is a state law, which basically says that citizens and municipalities cannot regulate where the towers or where what's called the small cells, which I can explain what those are, go up. That basically the cities and the citizens have no say, and as long as it's in a public right of way or some part of city property, that the telecom companies can just basically put them where they want, as long as they're meet the specs of what it's supposed to be.
So, Dr. Ben, let's jump into first what is the EMF radiation doing to human bodies?
So it's doing a number of things. You listed off a great list in the beginning. So it is. I mean, we can go off, but one of the scariest thing is that it actually opens up the blood-brain barrier. And so for those of you who don't maybe have a health background or a biology background, that is basically the brain has a way of only selectively letting things in that come in through the blood. Okay. And so like certain things that are toxic to the brain, it has ways of keeping it out. The EMFs do something to the brain. It's not well understood, but it's been documented, and they've actually done studies in rats and other animal, maybe it was rats, some animal, basically showing that they expose them to microwave radiation and then cut them open and can actually show the perforations in the blood-brain barrier. So that means that toxins that are in the system that are already in your body, in your bloodstream, that normally wouldn't make it to your brain, like mercury from flu vaccines, aluminum from pretty much most vaccines, any kind of toxicity that's already in your system is going to kind of have an easier way to make it to your brain. So that's damaging. It affects cardiac health, heart health, big time, because what it does is the radiation is pulsed. So it's not a continuous beam. It's like a zip, 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 but increments of much higher frequency. So it's a constant zap, on, off, on, off, on, off. And what it does is it affects something called the voltage-gated calcium channel, which are in cardiac tissue predominantly. And this channel basically lets calcium in and out of the heart cells. And when basically that allows a contraction of the heart. And so when this calcium channel that normally the body controls it by itself and the nervous system controls it, when it's getting these exogenous signals of these EMFs, it's opening the channel when it shouldn't be. And so people are getting heart palpitations, they're getting blood clots, having heart attacks, all kinds of crazy stuff. So it definitely affects heart health. It affects the nervous system big time, because as we know, the nervous system communicates via electromagnetic frequency, right? It sends electrical signals. It sends chemical signals. We have reason to believe it also sends acoustic signals, which is another conversation. But it's affecting brain health. It's affecting the nervous system. A lot of people, experience anxiety when exposed to EMFs. That's a big problem. Headaches, migraines, all of that, because it's affecting the nervous system. And you and I, as chiropractors, know that the nervous system is a master control system for everything. So if you start, adversely affecting that, any number of things could go wrong.
Absolutely. Dr. Ben, what technology is radiating these EMF frequencies, or what technology and what devices are radiating these harmful frequencies?
So, anything that sends a signal, it's just to varying degrees. So your cell phone, it sends it. If you have any kind of Bluetooth device and it's on, it's sending a signal. If you have Wi-Fi in your home, you're being exposed to this all the time. Now, is that stuff harmful? Yes, to a degree. But the amount of radiation that you're going to be experiencing from a 5G tower, especially one that's, in your neighborhood, is going to be significantly more. To give you an idea, there's something called effective radiating power, which is like how much radiation you actually get hit by from something. To make a call on your cell phone, you need 0.1 watts. Okay, and that's for I think it's 0.2 watts for 5 bars of reception. Okay, it's either 0.1 or 0.2. I don't remember offhand. The towers are allowed to have an effective radiating power of 7,500 watts.
What?
Yes. So it's the amount of radiation you're experiencing from these is much greater. Because if you think about a typical 4G cell tower, which is the old generation, these things are 200 feet in the air, and they're usually not near your property. They can space them out a lot more because they use a frequency band that everything needs to be so close together. So now the tower is 50 feet from your house and 50 feet off the ground. So you're much closer to it, and you're much closer to a lot of them, because the way they want to build them out, there's going to be hundreds of them in every city, and they're going to be basically on every street corner, as much as 50 feet apart.
And are they on 24/7?
As far as I know, yeah. I mean,
Jeez.
People need access. I mean, you can make calls on your cell phone 24/7, right? I mean, there's never a time when the network's down. I mean, once in a while, but yeah.
Yeah. And I also saw something very interesting, that not only is it affecting our bodies and our health, it's also infecting the environment, the trees, the plants. It's killing everything around that. And all these towers are they're either by our house or they're in these mountains and forests, and it's probably just killing all the plant life and trees around that area as well. Is that correct?
Yep, it's killing bees, it's killing trees. I mean, we have a problem now. There's a type of cactus, okay? And if you're from Arizona, you probably know this, but there's something called a saguaro cactus, which is like the stereotypical iconic cactus. All right, when you think of a cactus, you probably think of a saguaro. It really only grows in Phoenix and Tucson, okay? And a little bit surrounding area. It doesn't really grow outside of Arizona. These things are dying all across the state. And, whatever state department looks over this kind of thing is set out an alert. Like, these cacti are dying, and we got to figure out why. We don't know why. So it definitely is harmful to definitely more than just humans. It's affecting everybody. And as you know, if the bees die, well, they're the one who pollinate our plants, and we need the plants to eat, because whether you only eat plants or you eat animals, I mean, the animals have to be fed plants. So it's a threat to our food system as well.
Are there any measures being taken with this data out that said, hold the phone, why don't we rethink this? Or is there another strategy or something else as an alternative to the 5G towers?
Great question. So there's a lot of people who are involved in trying to fight this throughout the country, throughout each state, throughout other, Europe and other countries. So there's definitely a concerted effort to stop it. There are people suing, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suing the FCC, which is sort of like the equivalent of like the CDC or the FDA, but for the telecom industry. It's like the organization supposed to regulate the telecom industry, which we can, and just like any of these organizations, they're corrupt, they're bought off. Most of the people who work there used to work for the telecom industry.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. But there is an alternative. That's such a great question, Kevin, because a lot of people think, oh, well, you're some like technophobic nut job.
Yeah.
Who, like, I want to download Netflix in my car,
Yeah.
We have to have technology, and I understand,
Yeah.
and I agree. I want better internet connectivity, of course. But there's a way to do it in a safe way. And so the solution that I have proposed, and many people that I work with propose, is to basically do fiber optic cable to the premises. So instead of beaming the internet at everybody through the air, okay, and just hitting them with a bunch of radiation, do fiber optic cable. It goes underground, okay. It doesn't give off, maybe it gives off some radiation, but like a tiny fraction of
what's going on now. Yeah.
It's considerably safer. It's actually believe cheaper. And the idea is that, you fiber optic to everybody's home and business and whatever. And then if you want to do Wi-Fi inside your own, in your own business or home, like do it.
Yeah.
You want to make cell phone calls, you want to do that kind of thing. Well, we can use the towers that give off the 0.1 watts. They're a lot safer than the ones that give off 7,500. So there's definitely a way to connect everybody safely. You just won't be able to like watch Netflix movies in your car. Which, you should be driving, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's alarming to me the most is the kids now these days have essentially never lived without this technology. And we're scratching the surface of the dangers that it's having on our bodies. These kids are going to be exposed to this their entire life. They're not even going to have a chance for a healthy immune system. And that's sad. Are you seeing, are you personally, like I have a couple patients that come into the office that they think some of their anxiety is coming strictly from the EMF factors going on in the world today. Are you seeing any of like personal cases or seeing it might play a factor in anything in your practice?
I have had some people who have claimed to be EMF sensitive and have, taken measures to reduce their exposure. It's not something I have a whole lot of empirical data on that I've seen personally.
Right.
Although I will share my own personal story, which is after getting educated on this and diving into it, I thought, just to be safe, just to lower my exposure, like I'm going to start turning off my Wi-Fi at night when I go to bed. And I'm going to put my phone, like turn it off or put on airplane mode just to mitigate exposure, like just to be wise. Because also the way it is where I live, my Wi-Fi router just happens to be right next to my bed because that's where the coax comes into my place. So I was like, this thing's just shooting right at my head. Like this probably turn it off. So I was doing this for, I've been doing this for several weeks now. And I had one morning where I woke up and I deal with anxiety. It's just, I'm sure many people do. Sometimes it's pretty bad. Most of the time it's not too bad. But I tend to wake up with anxiety. And one morning I woke up and my anxiety was just like red lighting, like it was bad. And I couldn't really think of anything in particular that I was anxious about that day. But it's just like, man, I woke up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'm anxious. I can't fall back asleep. Blah, what's going on? And I go and I realize like Wi-Fi router's still plugged in. Oops. Now that I've been doing this sort of experiment of one for several weeks, I've noticed that the days that I remember to unplug my router at night, which is now almost every day, I feel considerably less, if no anxiety when I wake up. When I used to just always wake up with anxiety, I just kind of got used to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a tip. If anybody has experienced anxiety, and I think most people are these days, it's an epidemic. Give that a try. See if it helps you. It's pretty easy to do. You're just turning off your Wi-Fi, turning devices off at night, anything that gives off radiation, and see if you wake up with less anxiety.
Cell phone on airplane mode because everybody's sleeping with it right next to their bed too.
Yeah.
Ben, have you ever heard of Shungite crystals?
I've heard the name. What I will say is that there's a lot of people out there who are, maybe well-intentioned, maybe not, selling different technologies that block.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shungite crystal, I haven't seen any evidence that stuff works.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I wanted to scratch your brain on because there's a couple places actually in the town where I live that they claim that they have data that it's shielding against the EMFs. I saw a video on YouTube where they put the Shungite crystal in front of the router and the EMF went down. So it's not valid empirical data that we're looking at. I found it interesting.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see if because you're the second person that I brought that up to a couple people and some people, and you're pretty skeptical yourself. You want to find an answer for this. They were just kind of like, you know what, I don't know, I really haven't seen anything to confirm that.
Yeah, so there's one technology that I've seen that seems to have some effect, but it's relatively expensive, and it's not just like wearing a crystal around your neck.
And so what is that technology?
So let me explain. And first off, like it's like I live in this world where like I seem to be talking about a lot of things that people seem far-fetched, you know,
Right.
like I eat a raw food diet, I practice network chiropractic.
Yeah.
I do a lot of out there things, but I'm still at heart an engineer, scientist, someone who wants to see evidence.
Right.
So when these things come along, I am like, oh, I hope it works, but let's see. So what people have been doing, and they often like, it's not something you can wear, but silver seems to be good at blocking EMFs. And so one good thing to do is that there are devices that can detect
Right.
EMF like a Geiger counter, okay? And so I've seen this in person tested where basically they create a mesh. Like if you ever have like a mosquito net, or you stay in a bed somewhere, maybe in the tropics, where they have to keep the mosquitoes out, so they have this big mesh net around the bed. Well, they basically make one of those out of silver, and it seems to block EMFs. Based on what I've seen with people testing it in person. Obviously, you can't go around in like a suit. You can't be the Silver Surfer walking around in cape, right?
Yeah.
But that metal does seem to be able to like mitigate EMFs pretty well. So if people want to check out, there's a website. It's called Safe Living Technologies. This is pretty much the only company that I endorse that sells any EMF mitigating products. Mm-hmm. It's slt.co is the website, Safe Living Technologies.
Beautiful. So, Dr. Ben, what do you like? Where do you see the technology going in the next 5 years? I mean, is that something that we can kind of look that far ahead to, or is that just kind of a big question mark?
Well, I can tell you where they want to take it.
Let's hear it.
I'll fight it. But the idea, and look, I don't think there's a bunch of evil people like doing evil deeds. I think people are good at, there's some bad apples out there. Sure, absolutely. Right. But most of this is done with the best of intentions.
Right.
Okay. When I worked at this, these companies, like we thought we were like really innovative, and we were. Mm-hmm. But the idea is basically just get things hyper connected, so that it's like, if 5G is bouncing off everything, that we're more interconnected. We have this phenomenon called the Internet of Things, which, funny enough, when people started talking about it at my old company back in 2010, they got laughed out of the room. But they basically said the internet connectivity will get so good that things will be able to talk to each other. So if you order a box from Amazon, well, the box will have its own RFID chip, so you can see like exactly where it is on the freeway when it's coming to you. We'll be able to track everything. And so that's what it's headed for. There's better internet connectivity, so manufacturing will be more efficient. You'll be able to, like, you want an Uber, well, like it'll be so instantaneous that you press a button on your phone, like 2 seconds later, the car just pulls up, right?
Right.
That's where they want to get the technology. They have things like all these smart devices. Okay. So like you have a smart diaper that, like, since you're too busy, like, watching CNN on your phone, when your kid craps their diaper, you get a text message, right? Because God forbid you should actually watch over your kid. And of course your kid's getting, radiation in their genitalia the whole time wearing the smart diaper. It gives off EMFs.
Yes.
But this is the kind of technology they want to have everything super hyper connected, a smart home. So it's like, oh, the temperature, we can let more sunlight in and we don't need to run the heat as much. So to optimize, but in that process, you're exposing people to more and more and more EMFs.
Right. Yeah. And it does sound like the intentions are good. I find it like the situation's a little bit of a different situation than big pharma and everything, because everybody has to everybody's getting this radiation shot at them.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody's got to kind of live under that umbrella, whereas big pharma, it's like not everybody's taking their vaccines, and there definitely is a different agenda there. So there might be hope for this then. There might be hope that it might want to we might want to look in this and take a safer route.
You bring up a good point, Kevin, that, with vaccines, you can opt out for the most part. I mean, they make it more and more difficult. They try to have mandates. I was just on the call this morning with a mom in California who's like, they have the laws. I literally have to do it if I want to send my kids to school. Kind of true. The only exemption you get is a medical exemption in California. So there definitely, is an agenda to force more and more people to do it. But with 5G, yeah, it's raining down from the sky. It's like there's no opting out. It's either everybody gets it or nobody gets it.
Yeah.
Unless you want to move to the Amazon, remote parts of the Amazon.
Yeah. Which are currently on fire.
Yeah, they're currently on fire. It definitely is something that is going to affect everybody, and there's no opting out. But that's the health side. Okay, we've talked a lot about the health side, and I hope I've made a convincing enough argument that you should at least look into it.
Look into it for sure.
But when we talk about this interconnectedness, that your Amazon shipment's gonna have its own RFID chip on the box. You can see exactly where it is in the highway. Well, guess what? your phone has an RFID chip. You've seen Elon Musk talking about where you can implant a chip in your brain. We've seen technologies with where you can implant a chip in your arm because you can your credit card can be on there or whatever. Well, that goes both ways because it provides a service, but now you're basically being tracked.
You're a tracking system, yeah.
And so I didn't really. When I started to get worried about this was when I started getting censored on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I would post something critical of the lockdown, of the death counts, of just anything going on with COVID, or I post something critical of 5G, talked about critical vaccines, that it would get censored. Because, hey, I'm saying something that, the industry doesn't like, and they have enough power to censor me. Well, what if I say something about, whoever's in, who's ever in power, or I say something about, something else I don't like. And, they can, now that they have if you're carrying your wallet and a microchip in your wrist, they turn off your money, right? Mm-hmm. Or they can turn off this, or they can make it so you can't get food. The implication, not that anything is happening, but the implications are very powerful, that they have a lot more control over you. They want to move to a cashless society. Well, if you're a persona non grata in the cashless society, you can't even transact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the security implications, and the fact that this technology can essentially surveil you, okay, and mine your data. I mean, the tower's right outside your home, so never mind they don't like what you're doing. They turn off your social media. They turn off your access to food. They can mine your data. They can sell it without your consent, and they can basically track you. So it is a way of hurting people. And if the wrong people get in power, or people with devious plans to do things that people don't want, they have a lot more control over people, and it becomes much harder to fight back.
Absolutely.
This technology can do things like, oh, this person's not wearing a mask, or these people aren't 6 feet apart, or this kind of things. So the potential for government overreach, corporate overreach, and basically using this technology to sort of control the population, to force it to its will, is definitely there. The possibility is there.
And it's not too far off. I've seen a couple of videos of people in Australia and New Zealand that they'll post something on Facebook about a rally or supporting one thing, and the next thing you know, the cops are inside their house trying to arrest them.
Yep.
So that's absurd. It's everything's being censored, everything's being watched, and it's definitely the direction we're going in.
Yeah, and so I was never really a big free speech guy until I started getting censored. And then I realized, wow, this is a great way of essentially silencing dissent. So there's a lot of ways in which the technology could be used, like any technology, for very nefarious things. if it fell into the wrong hands. And so, and it's a technology we can't opt out of, as we talked about. So I think it's something we need to just, call an audible and call a moratorium and say, okay, let's make sure this stuff's safe. And the data is pretty clear on microwave radiation. Even though there haven't been large-scale studies on actual 5G, we know what microwave radiation does to people, and that should be enough to sound the alarm and call a moratorium.
Absolutely. Dr. Ben, are there any platforms that you like to look into that censorship is not as extreme as it is on Google and Facebook and Twitter and all that? I've heard of like DuckDuckGoose search engine. I actually, before this podcast, I was just trying to find some data on 5G, and nothing really negative pops up on Google, which is pretty alarming.
Yeah, great question. And I've been on a similar search. I think it's kind of the Wild West right now. That there's definitely, a lot of censorship-free platforms coming up. And then there's platforms that start off censorship-free, and they either get bought by like a Google or something like that, or whoever created them decides that they want to censor some specific voice, even if it's not what mainstream media is censoring or Google is censoring. So it's kind of this nascent stage. There's nothing really that good out there. DuckDuckGo, as far as I know, is now under Google. It's been compromised. So there's a browser, and I believe and I just heard about this the other night, a browser, and I believe a search engine called Brave, which is supposed to be freedom friendly, as we would say. I know there's like MeWe, there's Parler, but I heard that Parler started censoring people. So it's tricky. There's messaging services like Signal and Telegram, which are more like encrypted text messaging services. They're not really, they're not really social media sites.
Gotcha.
So there's BitChute, which is like uncensored YouTube, but that's also like the Wild West. I mean, there's just terrible stuff on there. But it's no holds barred. So it's a good question. I would say Brave for a browser and possibly a search engine. BitChute for a completely uncensored like video sharing site. But all the big boys, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, they're all cracking down, as I'm sure you've seen. So I wish I had a better answer for that. We urgently need something like that. Also, you familiar with Brian Rose and London Real?
No.
Okay, so that is a fantastic platform. He's got something called the Digital Freedom Platform. It's digitalfreedom.tv. And so he had a YouTube channel, a podcast, all that, a lot of great content on it. I think you'd really enjoy it. And then stuff started getting censored. He got kicked off of, I think he's told like, you have one more strike to go on YouTube and you're kicked out. He got deplatformed in a bunch of places. And so he created his own like live streaming service and website. It's not a social media site, but just a platform to put all this stuff like the pandemic documentary that's getting censored, have a home for it.
Right.
So that's another one. But yeah, we urgently need that, and we don't quite have something.
Dr. Ben, how do people get involved if they are feeling passionate, they want to do something for their community about pretty much everything that's going on, whether it's 5G, COVID, other health issues? How do people get involved these days?
Good question. I can point to a few resources. If they do want to get involved with the 5G thing, there's a website, 5gcrisis.com. And they have a lot of news. They do petitions and things like that, and show you a little bit how to get more involved in your local community. But chances are, this is really a community organizing thing. And the way we're going to defeat a lot of this is at just the grassroots level. So if there isn't an organization in your city, well, you're tasked with creating one. Sorry. Yeah. That's what I did. Okay. Didn't want to be devoting all this time to it, but it was either me or nobody.
Right.
So for Arizona, we have a website. It's called Arizona for Safe Technology. So it's AZ4 safetech.org. So AZ for safetech.org. That's ours. You get on our email list. We've got a lot of things going on. If you want to get involved just in general with sort of all the attacks on the liberties, whether it's mandated vaccines, mandated masks, mandated social distancing, 5G, all that together, there's a group called the Rise. and they're forming chapters all over the country. We have a really strong one here in Arizona, and it's just basically just a coalition and a network of people that want to preserve liberties and want to prevent what we'll call technocratic overreach of the telecom companies and the pharmaceutical companies trying to basically get a stranglehold on our government and basically legislate things that would be favorable for them and mandate things that would be favorable for them and really not generally that good for the populace.
All right. I love that. And Dr. Ben, where can people find you and your platforms?
Sure. So almost every platform is just my name. So, which is a long one. It's a mouthful, Dr. Benjamin Benulis. You just search for that. You'll find me. Mostly on Instagram. That's where I post most of the stuff. Yeah, that's so Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, but mostly Instagram.
Gotcha. And Dr. Ben, what is one piece of advice that has really resonated with you over the years? It could pertain to absolutely anything that you would like to gift the audience that you feel that might resonate with them.
If something doesn't seem right in your heart, like what's going on in the world, and the story just doesn't add up, you're probably onto something. Trust your gut, go with your instinct, don't follow the crowd. Listen to your own conscience.
Trust that belly barometer. Absolutely. All right, Doc. Thank you for coming on the show as always. Love hearing everything you have to say. Would love to have you back on anytime. And thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. This was great. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.